It's almost a little shocking how important the Donkey Kong series was to Nintendo in the early days of the Famicom. Within the first year of the console's launch, 4 titles were released. You had ports of the 3 arcade games, Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3, as well as an edutainment game exclusive to the Famicom, Donkey Kong Jr. Math. There was even a 5th Donkey Kong game they planned to release in the same time frame called Donkey Kong's Fun with Music, though that was ultimately cancelled late into development. With single-screen arcade-style games rapidly becoming more and more obsolete, Nintendo put the series away following 1984's Donkey Kong 3 port. 4 games in 1 year, and then nothing for the rest of the console's life. Well, from Nintendo anyway. For whatever reason, the Donkey Kong franchise really struck a chord with pirate developers. Hummer Team, 2 teams of ex-Sachin devs, and a group that would ultimately go on to form Wai-Shin all took a crack at it. In fact, Donkey Kong was arguably the series best represented by pirate devs. Where Mario saw mostly oddball releases like Kart Fighter and Somari, with only Hummer's Mario World really feeling like a Mario game, Donkey Kong on the other hand got 3 platformers ostensibly based on the first country game, another based on DKC2, and another based on the first Donkey Kong Land. The series is also noteworthy for having releases that land at both ends of the bootleg game quality curve, with DKC4 being something I unironically enjoy playing, and Donkey Kong Banana Boat being in contention for one of the worst platformers, period. We're not looking at either of those today, however. Instead, we're taking a look at, Super Donkey Kong 2, a demake of Donkey Kong Country 2. The game was developed by a team of ex-Sachin developers led by Yan Wen Wang. Like most of the games by these devs, it was likely originally published by NT. This publisher's carts are pretty prevalent on eBay nowadays, easily identifiable by their NT or KT ID. Their labels for the most part feature that certain aesthetic that's a dead giveaway that it's a bootleg while not being the Punisher. Some are also pretty unique for being more vertically inclined for whatever reason. I suppose we should talk about the game now. At just 3 levels long, you might think this game is more Con than Kong. But that's not entirely fair. We'll probably never know the decisions that led to the game being released in this seemingly incomplete form, but there's enough evidence over the course of the game's 3 levels to make me believe that the devs did care. The potential starts with the title screen, which is a genuinely nice rendering of the one on the Super Nintendo. The music is even a fair approximation. In the canon of Donkey Kong bootlegs, this is probably the best title screen, though, to be fair, DKC4 had a fairly well done title screen and an intro cutscene to boot. From here you can start the game or press A, B, and select to open a hidden, but mostly non-functional password screen. All it does is bring up the logo of Gold Leopard, which is a brand of Famicom, I believe. Pressing start brings us to another shining achievement of this game, the overworld map. Yes, this game with 3 levels has an overworld map, and Diddy actually moves across it. Like the title screen, the map itself looks great, with the notable exception of DK Island, which has suffered some head trauma. I'm guessing that in both cases they essentially traced the image from an SNES, which is a little interesting considering that the same technique was used to produce the SNES artwork, which was originally 3D wireframe models. It's essentially a photograph of the reality. Stanley Kubrick would be proud. Getting into the first level, it becomes apparent that this is just an all-around nice-looking game. The contrast between the ocean background, the ship itself, and Diddy is perfect, which in most cases is asking the bare minimum, but considering the background is multicolored and animated, albeit choppily, it was worth highlighting. The ship's environment is also pretty varied visually, with many of the details from the SNES game being present here, even if some of them, like these handrails, can't communicate their purpose as effectively due to hardware limitations. The sprites and their associated animations all do their jobs admirably. Details like Diddy's idle animation and end-of-level victory dance are frankly unexpected, but of course very welcome. Sometimes the Famicom's limitations have to make themselves known with extreme flicker, so one of the trade-offs for the sprites being as relatively large and detailed as they are. Honestly, I'm fine with it, and I would definitely prefer these larger, more accurate sprites to the alternative, even if it means a little, or in some cases, a lot of flicker. Alright, I think we've sufficiently gushed about the visuals. They're amazing, and I don't think anyone could really deny that. So how does it play? Really good. It's pretty comparable to Donkey Kong Country 4 in terms of physics and controls, but might even be a bit better. Jumping doesn't have that momentum halting effect so common to pirate games. If I could compare it to anything, it would be Famicom Mario World with the Game Genie physics codes enabled. How's that for a deep cut that I should feel severely ashamed for referencing? Running around also feels nice, and generally movement feels responsive. Things can get a bit sketchy when there's a lot going on the screen, but the controls are never unworkable. There's a surprising amount of diversity gameplay-wise over the course of the 3 levels, both in terms of level layout, gimmicks, and even enemies. Each stage offers something brand new, the first being your standard platforming fare with enemies that crawl, limp, and charge, the second a vertical rope climbing stage with enemies that slide down said ropes, and the third a level where you become a snake and fight bouncing, flying, and shooting enemies. As you can see, all 3 major genres of level are represented. Aside from one pretty nasty jump at the end of level 3, the level design is fair and mimics that of the original very well. With this game, the devil's in the details, and it's probably going to come down to personal taste whether you find these shortcomings charming or annoying. The game's greatest fault, of course, is its length. The entire game can be completed in under 3 minutes, which really shouldn't be acceptable for any game that makes it to retail, bootleg or otherwise. The flip side of that is that it's kind of fun to speedrun, but really that's only a consolation for bootleg enthusiasts like myself in the modern day. Some of my other criticisms, bizarrely enough, come from the fact that the game includes too many features from the SNES version. What a truly weird game. The first such feature are the banana coins. What are they doing here? It beats me, they serve absolutely no purpose. They're the best evidence, however, that this game was intended to be much more than what amounts to the demo we got here. Then again, their inclusion could be totally arbitrary with no deeper meaning, and the Kong letters are the best evidence for that theory. While they are technically functional, collecting all 4 will grant you an extra life. That is only really applicable to the first level, because level 2 is missing the G, and level 3 has 2 N's instead of the G. Their gameplay function is actually less important than their role as a shiny object you can collect. The gameplay itself also isn't 100% there. For the most part, it's solid, but there are weird little scenarios that the devs didn't really seem to plan for. One of the more annoying ones is that you can't jump on 2 enemies at the same time without dying. Along the same lines, you can't kill enemies while holding a box. Also, unlike the SNES game, if an enemy runs into a box while you're holding it, you die, not the enemy. In the game's final level, you play as the creatively named Rattly the Rattlesnake. Generally, I like how it controls. It's very much like how I would expect an upright snake bouncing on its coiled up tail to feel. The very last section, however, requires a pretty difficult jump off of some bees, and it's the one time where it feels like the level design is not meshing with the controls and physics, which would need to be just a bit tighter and floatier respectively for this section to feel good. You might have guessed from the footage you've seen so far, but yes, Dixie is not playable. I bring it up as a critique, but honestly, this might be a good thing. The game would be easy to the point of being unengaging if you could use her floatability, or even just take an extra hit. Lastly, there's the ending, which is identical to the game over screen, aside from the text. It seems no matter what you do, you end up spending the rest of your days in Crocodile Pirate Jail. Again, this is going to come down to personal taste as to whether this is something that bothers you. Personally, I find it kinda hilarious, and in my opinion, it's the perfect way to cap off a game this incomplete. In all honesty, if you don't come away from the ending chuckling to yourself on the first playthrough, bootleg games might not be your thing. Now, before we end the review, I want to talk about something I only briefly mentioned earlier, and that's the music, and actually the audio in general. I think an excellent job was done all around porting the music. Each track is easily identifiable, and they just sound pretty nice. However, this is another moment where the game's ambition and the Famicom's hardware are made to compete, and the result can be distracting at times. Anytime another sound plays, part of the music track drops out, and sound effects are playing often. Not that these sounds are annoying on their own, I was actually really impressed with how well they replicated the sound that the rat enemies make. but when the music cuts out to the point of being unrecognizable, things aren't great. Ultimately, the game should have prioritized being able to hear the music, so the quality of the tracks could be fully appreciated. Overall, Super Donkey Kong 2 is a fun oddity that has a lot to offer despite its short length, but probably isn't worth owning unless you're the kind of person that's already been subscribed to this channel for years now. This isn't the last time we'll hear from NT. It seems they have a penchant for extremely short games that can still manage to impress the hell out of you. But until then, this has been Mike the Gamer Guy, and I hope to see you next time. Shoutouts to my Tier 4 patron Famicom pony.